Let's go through the process of properly linking in another Revit model into your new project. First, go to the Insert tab and then select on Link Revit. In the Import Link Revit dialog box, make sure that you're looking at your Chapter 5. Then select Arc Link Model. This happens to be an architectural model that will link directly into our Revit project. Now, before we link it into the project, we can see that we have a positioning option that we need to set. Click where we have the positioning option, and then you'll see 6 different options available to us as far as where in the Revit model this linked file can get linked into. Now, I always avoid using the manual options because it leaves a lot of room for error. Let's forget about using the manual options and just focus on the auto options. The 3 different auto options that are available are Auto Center to Center, which means it links in that Revit model just roughly in the center of your current model or project environment. The second option is Auto Origin to Origin. This is the most common way that if you have just 2 Revit models, one Revit model is starting to get modeled based off of the other Revit model that you'll use. So, for instance, you may link in an architectural model, then start to do your drawings based off of that location where the architectural model was originally loaded into your project. That would be an origin to origin situation. The next option is auto by shared coordinates. This means that you have the same coordinates in each of the different models, so that in 3-dimensional space, each of these models are sitting in the exact same location. This is an ideal solution if you're linking in CAD files into your Revit project because you'll have your CAD file origin point and you'll be able to line that up with the coordinates of your Revit model. But this also works with projects that have multiple Revit models as well. For this example, what I'd like to do is start by loading this project in center to center, and then move the project to the appropriate shared coordinates point inside of this Revit model. Then finally, I'd like to publish these shared coordinates back to the architectural model so that they both share the same coordinates. So to accomplish that, we'll start by selecting Auto Center to Center and then click on Open. We'll give it a moment to actually load in that Revit model. And what I'd like to do is zoom out and then make sure that this corner of the Revit model where we have A and this column is moved all the way down to this intersection of A and 1. So to accomplish that, we'll simply select on the link, come here to Move, we'll zoom back in here, find the intersection of these 2 column grids, zoom back out, zoom in, all by just spinning the wheel of the mouse, and then click at the intersection of grids 1 and A to move that into place. Now, the next thing I'd like to do is take a look at our model inside of an elevation view. So underneath the project browser, find your elevations and then double click on South to open up your South elevation view. Then zoom in. One of the things that we can see is that in fact it has brought in this model at the correct elevation. And we can see that if we zoom in toward the middle of the model, and here we can see that our level 1 is even with the level 1 over here on the right-hand side. Now, this 0, 1 entry level happens to be the level of the linked model. Now, unfortunately, though, we can see that our level 2 and level 3 do not line up with what would be considered the level 2 and level 3 of this model. So what we need to do is move these levels so that they line up with our linked-in model. To accomplish that, I'll just select on level 3, then hold my mouse button down and then drag it up so it's at the correct elevation. And then do the same thing with level 2. Click on the line, drag it up until it's lined up with the correct level. Now, by doing that, we have our levels at the correct height inside of our project environment. The next thing I'd like to do is go back to that plane view. So to accomplish that, I just need to close down this view. So I'll come up to the X, click on the X, and come back here to plan view. Now what I'd like to do is pin this Revit model in place so that it can't move around accidentally as we're clicking and trying to select on things. So if we click on the Revit model, now we should come up here to the little pin head, which stands for pin, and we'll pin that Revit model in place and keep us from accidentally moving that link around. The next thing I'd like to do, now that we've moved this to the correct spot, is publish the coordinates, which means we'll take the coordinates from our current Revit model and then publish them back to the architectural model so that we share the same coordinates in three-dimensional space in both Revit files. To accomplish that, we'll move our mouse up to the Manage tab. Then we need to select on Coordinates. After clicking on Coordinates, we need to select Publish Coordinates, which means we'll be sending our coordinates back to that architectural model. After clicking on Publish Coordinates, we select on the architectural model, and it'll say, do you want to update these coordinates? And at this stage, we can either duplicate the coordinates and then publish those back, or just change the current existing internal coordinates. In fact, that's what I'd like to do in this case, is just change their current existing internal coordinates. And we'll click on OK. And now it takes a few seconds because it's sending that information from your current Revit model back to that architectural Revit model. But now in that original architectural Revit model, those coordinates have now been saved back to that model environment. Now, technically, we could just leave it as it is. But to show that we, in fact, did publish those coordinates back, one of the things that I would like to do is start off by coming up here to Save, and I'd like to save this Revit project. And when you do, it'll say you have changed the current position in that architectural linked model. What would you like to do? What you want to do is you want to save that new position back to the linked file. You're kind of making it official. So you select on Save. It's now saved your changes and has saved those positions back in that original model. Now, to prove that those coordinate points have stuck and they're part of that model, what I'd like to do is come in here to Manage Links, click on the Architectural Link Model, and now I'm going to remove that Revit link. It's going to give us a warning message, and that's okay. And I'll click on OK. Once again, I want to mention we did not have to do this step. I just want to show that when we link this file back into our current model, that it'll link in to the correct place. Now, if we come in here to the Insert tab, the next thing we can do is Link Revit. What we want to link back in is going to be that architectural model. Come up here to the Arc Link Model, make sure that the positioning is set to by shared coordinates. Now, this would not have worked before. In fact, we would have gotten an error message saying these two models do not have shared coordinates. But by doing the process that we did, we've now shared the coordinates between the two projects. So if we click on Open, we'll now see that model get linked in to the correct spot here inside of our own model. And at this stage, we should once again select on the model, come up here to pin it. That will keep it from accidentally moving to a different location.